Patrice clinked her wine glass against mine with a smirk and muttered, "I wish he'd just disappear," loud enough that it slid through the quiet of the dining room like a knife under skin. Everyone at the table froze. Her friend Carla's eyes went wide. Our neighbor Drew gave a polite chuckle, the kind people make when they don't want to pick sides. I heard someone drop their fork. It wasn't the first time Patrice had humiliated me in public, but it was the first time she said it like she meant it. Like I was a piece of furniture she'd grown tired of tripping over. I wiped my mouth with a napkin, looked up slowly, and said, calm as Sunday morning, "The moving truck's coming at 8. She laughed, too loud, too fake. "Moving where?" I smiled without blinking. "You'll find out." No one said a damn word after that. And that was the moment I stopped being a husband. Not out of anger. Out of precision. I finished my wine, helped clear the plates like the trained golden retriever I'd been for decades, then excused myself. In the soft glow of the study lamp, I opened the laptop I kept locked in the old toolbox under the sink, hidden in plain sight. I logged into our joint accounts. One click, another, confirm. Boom. I was gone. Financially, legally, almost surgically. It felt clean. I didn't leave with drama. I didn't sleep in the guest room. I didn't even take a suitcase. I just sat in the dark living room, watching the ceiling fan spin, listening to the ticking clock Patrice insisted on keeping even though it never kept time. And I realized, this wasn't revenge. This was freedom from theater. No more stage makeup. No more cue cards taped to my spine reading smile and apologize. She didn't notice me rerouting my pension. Didn't ask why my phone buzzed at 1:13 a.m. with a confirmation code from a bank she forgot we had. She never asked what happened to the second mailbox key, or why I'd suddenly taken up volunteering every Friday afternoon. Because I'd learned the best way to disappear wasn't to run. It was to become invisible in plain sight, while building a runway no one saw coming. By the way, 98% of you listening to this story haven't subscribed yet. If you enjoy this kind of slow burn reckoning, hit that button. It keeps the stories flowing. And, believe me, what's coming next deserves your full attention. That night, I visited a storage unit I hadn't opened since 2009. Same dent in the corner wall, same flickering hallway light. I walked past the dusty mountain of boxes labeled M's college crap and unlocked the false wall I'd installed years ago when Patrice thought I was going through a phase of woodwork therapy. Behind it, one metal briefcase, untouched. Inside it, copies of deeds, financial statements, a set of notarized affidavits, and a prepaid debit card with enough to disappear for a year, no questions asked. Funny thing is, I didn't want to run. I just wanted her to see what it felt like to talk into a room and get no echo back. I wanted her to stand in her little queendom, wine glass in hand, and realize the crown was paper and the throne was folding metal. So when I came home at 3:17 a.m., and she was passed out with an empty bottle on her chest, I tucked the blankets around her shoulders like always, turned off the TV, picked up the half-eaten pie she left out, and smiled. She got her wish. She just didn't realize the disappearing act had already started. The morning after the dinner, Patrice was still drooling on the pillow when I backed out of the driveway at 6:03 a.m. She wouldn't notice my absence. Hell, she hadn't noticed my presence in years. The coffee was still warm in the thermos by the time I pulled off the highway, 2 towns east, into a neighborhood so forgettable even the GPS hesitated. Wexley Heights, a development built in the 80s, sandwiched between an abandoned grocery store and a shuttered bait shop. Nobody paid attention to it, and that's precisely why I kept the duplex here in my name and never said a word. My uncle left it to me in '08. Patrice was too busy planning our second New Beginning cruise to care what mail I was getting from the county registrar. The building stood like it always had, dull beige siding, green mailbox rusting just enough to look ugly, not enough to be replaced. But it was mine, untouched by her reach. The windows stared back at me like old friends who knew not to ask questions. Inside, it smelled of dust, plastic, and the faint trace of someone else's bad taste in wallpaper. I ran my fingers along the edge of the banister, solid wood, still no give. The pipes groaned like arthritic knees when I ran the tap, but the water came out clean. That's more than I could say about the lies in my house back home. I spent 40 minutes walking room to room. Not planning, not imagining, just confirming. This wasn't a fantasy. This was logistics. At 8 o'clock sharp, Roy pulled up in a silver pickup, parked diagonally across both spaces like he had every right to disrupt symmetry. He hadn't changed. Same gray jacket, same habit of chewing toothpicks like they were sentencing papers. He used to help guys like me back when transition was code for post-divorce rehab. Not this. Calculated vanishing. You sure? He asked, before even saying hello. I nodded. Been sure for a while. He popped the glove compartment and handed over the folder. The checklist was precise, typed in that mechanical font he liked. Vehicle title transfer. Revocable trust activation. Lease agreement signed, effective Monday. Primary residence reassignment. Insurance policies redirected. I initialed every line. No hesitation. Roy watched me like a man, confirming gravity still works. Your guy still good for Monday? I asked. He nodded. Movers at 8. Cleaning crew at noon. Realtor steps in by Thursday. Everything else is timed to digital triggers. I handed him a flash drive, encrypted and neatly labeled. Backups. Just in case. He took it, didn't even blink. You know, he said, chewing, you're the calmest disappearing man I've ever worked with. That's the trick, I said. You don't disappear from rage. You disappear from clarity. Roy chuckled. She gonna fight it? Not at first, I said, grabbing the manila envelope with the pre-approved wire instruction. She's too busy underestimating me. I didn't tell him about the little detail hidden in the lease, that the tenant moving in next door was Meredith. Not as a spy, just present, watchful. We'd talked quietly months ago. She knew what Patrice had said behind closed doors. She also knew her mother's brand of cruelty wasn't a phase. It was a pattern. I locked up the duplex, tucked the papers under my arm, and felt something I hadn't felt since my 3rd year of marriage. Control. Not power, not revenge, just the quiet, measured grip of control. On the way home, I passed a billboard advertising a couple's therapy retreat. Smiling faces, hand-holding in the woods. The irony made me laugh so hard I had to pull over. By the time I got back, Patrice was still in her robe, scrolling her phone, probably hunting for someone to validate last night's little joke. She didn't notice my shoes had gravel dust. She didn't ask where I'd been. That's the beautiful thing about disappearing. You can start long before anyone realizes you're gone. She's probably out buying a van to live in. Good riddance. The words floated down the hallway like poison mist, half muffled by laughter and clinking ice in her glass of evening bourbon. Patrice was on the phone with her sister, the fun one, the one who still wore leather jackets and called cheating just emotional flexibility. I stood just around the corner, in the dark alcove by the linen closet, listening like I'd learned to do over decades. Patrice never checked if I was nearby. I was the wallpaper, the soft background music of her daily performance. He's been so weird lately. I think he's losing it, she went on, with a dramatic whisper. He said something about a moving truck at dinner. Can you believe that? A truck? Like he has the spine. Her sister burst out laughing on speakerphone, and Patrice joined in, her cackle sharp and wine thick. Honestly, I hope he does leave. I could use the space. Maybe I'll finally redo the kitchen without his budget spreadsheets hanging over my shoulder. She had no idea that by the time she finished that sentence, I had already removed my name from every utility account linked to this house. Gas, electric, water, all her problem now. I even logged the disconnection notices neatly into a spreadsheet, not out of spite, but order. I wasn't angry. I was administrative. Earlier that afternoon, I'd visited the bank, our bank, and closed the joint safe deposit box. The one she never bothered to check, assuming it just held old rings and birth certificates. I emptied it methodically. My mother's wedding band, my grandfather's war medals, the deed to the small plot of land in Wyoming that Patrice always called your pathetic hilltop fantasy. Gone. Transferred. Safeguarded. The pension had already been rerouted 3 days ago. Direct deposit now slid quietly into a private account under my initials and a corporate LLC I registered 15 months back. The address tied to it? The duplex on Wexley Street. Legal. Invisible. Permanent. And still, she laughed, while she poured herself another drink and gossiped with her sister about how I probably can't even figure out how to use Craigslist. I was mapping the final pieces like a chessboard, move by move. A quiet king who'd let her dance across the board for decades, only to box her in, piece by piece, until there was nowhere left to go but off the table. That night, the neighborhood came alive. Strings of Christmas lights blinked on like the town was exhaling. Our street always got festive early. Clark from across the way already had a 9-foot inflatable Santa clumsily swaying in the yard. Kids ran down the sidewalk in puffy coats, laughing, dragging sleds across dead leaves. It smelled like firewood and cinnamon and distant hope. Inside our house, silence thick enough to chew. She stayed on the phone for another hour, drinking and giggling, her voice bouncing from casual cruelty to performative boredom. I stayed out of sight, in my office with the door cracked, printing out one final batch of statements, notarizing the last form, and sealing 3 envelopes with color-coded stickers, blue for Roy, red for the realtor, green for the lawyer. The old printer made a chirping noise as it finished. She didn't hear it. She was too busy planning how she'd repaint the bedroom walls once I was gone. That was the difference between us. She thought leaving was loud, dramatic, a suitcase in hand, maybe a screaming match on the lawn, some big scene where she'd get to be the victim. But I was carving my exit in whispers and decimals, one document at a time, one closed door after another. By the time she noticed the walls tightening, the house wouldn't be collapsing. It would simply be no longer hers. The accountant's office hadn't changed in 30 years, still smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and printer toner, with the same faded diploma from Syracuse crooked on the back wall. Harold Fitz was the kind of man who'd never updated his haircut or his ethics. Gray, reliable, quiet. Exactly the kind of man you want handling numbers that could ruin lives. He looked up from the petition I'd just handed him, his wireframe glasses sliding down his nose. "You sure about this, Martin?" I leaned back in the chair, unzipped the worn leather briefcase, and pulled out the first folder. Thick, tabbed, color-coded. "This one's just a warm-up," I said, placing it gently on the table. He opened it. American Express statements from the last 7 years, marked with red highlighter. Hotels in Asheville, 3 different jewelry stores in cities I'd never visited, Uber rides from bars to a residential address in Chesterfield that definitely wasn't her sister's. I handed him a second folder. This one was Messier, screen captures of her online poker sessions, withdrawals from shady betting sites, a $9,700 transfer marked consulting sent to a man listed in her phone as Daniel B., which I later confirmed through public records was the same man who owned the property she was mysteriously always watching a friend's dog at. Harold flipped through the papers like he was reading a thriller he didn't want to finish. "Jesus," he muttered. "Still want me to double-check the tax withholdings this quarter?" I asked deadpan. He exhaled sharply, leaned back, and gave me a long look. "You've been collecting this?" "For years," I said. "Why now?" "She finally gave me permission," I said. "At dinner. Told the whole table she wished I'd disappear." He didn't laugh. Harold was not the laughing type. He nodded, once slow, then opened his drawer, pulled out the thicker petition paperwork, the kind that doesn't just remove names from deeds, but invokes non-disclosure statutes, fraud clauses, and precedent from that ugly case in Minnesota we used to joke about before it got too real. "You're filing under spousal financial abuse," he said. "Correct. You'll need to show the timeline aligns with joint funds being used without consent." I handed over the final folder. My notes. Receipts she didn't think I kept. Cross-referenced timestamps from when I was logged into work across the country while her credit card pinged hotel room service 3 towns over. She didn't just spend without me, I said. She built a parallel life using our shared money. Lied about it. Mocked me while doing it. And she still doesn't know? I shook my head. She's too busy laughing with her sister. He looked down at the petition again, scribbled a note. "This won't be quick," he warned. "I don't need quick," I said. "I need precise." The room went quiet except for the low hum of the desktop PC. Harold adjusted his glasses, picked up the folders, and placed them into a locking cabinet beside the desk. This'll work," he said finally. "She's going to panic when she sees what's coming." "She's not going to see it," I said. "Not at first. That's the point." I stood, buttoned my coat, and shook his hand. "Next step is the black car." Harold blinked. "What black car?" I just smiled. "Thanks, Harold. Send the filings Monday. She thinks it's just another week." He nodded slowly, already back to his computer, typing into the client portal with the same quiet intensity he probably used to kill ants as a kid. Methodical, unmerciful, invisible. I left through the back door. I always used the back. Quiet. Predictable. Unlike what was about to happen next. Sunday morning arrived wearing a quiet tension, the kind that clings to the walls before a storm breaks. Patrice shuffled into the kitchen still in her robe, hair a frizzy halo of last night's neglect, mascara smudged into dark crescent moons beneath her eyes. The house was silent. Too silent. No clanking of dishes. No smell of bacon or coffee. Just the mechanical whir of the fridge and the faint hiss of the heating ducts. She barely noticed the missing second coffee mug. At 8:12 a.m., the black sedan pulled up. Matte black, not the cheap kind you rent, the kind that gets leased through quiet law firms and private consulting firms that don't advertise. It parked with surgical precision right in front of our driveway, engine humming low like a threat. Patrice watched through the blinds, brow furrowed, clutching her phone like a crucifix. She expected a delivery, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone from her ridiculous book club she never reads for. But the man who stepped out wasn't carrying muffins. He wore a charcoal suit, black gloves, no expression. His briefcase clicked open once. He pulled out a sealed folder. Thick, corner-tagged, professional. Walked to the door. The knock wasn't loud. Just final. She opened the door in her slippers, her robe tied haphazardly, still chewing whatever she found at the bottom of the cereal box. He didn't speak, just handed her the envelope with 2 fingers and walked away. She watched him go, blinking. Then, slowly, she tore the seal. The paper inside was crisp, formal, legal. Notice of termination of tenancy, effective immediately. Reassignment of property ownership in accordance with petition #48-112B. Vacate premises by 5 p.m. or be considered trespassing. Attached, signature pages, her own name on them. Inked months ago. She flipped through the pages like they were written in another language. Then again, and again. Then the scream. Martin, Martin, what the hell is this? Nothing. She ran through the house, slamming open doors like they owed her answers. The closet was half empty. My side. The drawers? Clean. Bathroom sink. No toothbrush. No razor. Kitchen counter? Keys. My car key fob. House key. Safety deposit box key. And a folded piece of thick stationery with my handwriting, printed neatly like I used to label my project folders. I heard you. Loud and clear. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, robe slipping off one shoulder, and read the note 3 more times as if it might change its meaning with repetition. She opened the garage. My car was gone. She called my cell. Disconnected. She ran upstairs, logged into our bank accounts. Access denied. By the time she sat down on the edge of the bed, my side now cold and missing the imprint she never noticed before, her hands were trembling so badly she dropped the sealed folder 3 times trying to get it back into the envelope. And still, no sound from the street. No cries of sympathy from the neighbors. No phone calls returned. Just that silent black car rolling off down the hill like it had never been there at all. She stared at the door, at the floor, at the keys, at the finality. She'd spent years mocking the idea of me leaving. Now she couldn't even find where the leaving began. The house wasn't burning. It wasn't being taken by a wrecking ball. It was simply no longer hers. And worse, there wasn't a single thing she could do about it. Patrice's fingers trembled as she redialed the 3rd number in a row. Straight to voicemail. Again. She tried our daughter next, Meredith. No answer. Then again. Then again. She left a frantic message on the 5th try, voice cracking. Meredith, your father's gone off the deep end. Please, call me. I don't know what's happening. She called my sister. My college friend. Even Clark, the neighbor she normally avoided unless she needed him to trim his hedges. Everyone had gone silent like someone hit mute on the entire town. She tossed the phone across the bed, missing the pillow and cracking it against the nightstand. It didn't matter. The screen was already cracked, just like her carefully curated world. By 11:30 a.m., the adrenaline took over. She stormed out, threw herself into the driver's seat still wearing her robe under a winter coat, and peeled out of the driveway like she had somewhere left to matter. She sped toward her sister's house 3 towns over, rehearsing outrage and confusion the entire way. He's losing it. He's trying to erase me. I need help. Tell me I'm not crazy. But when she arrived and slammed the door behind her, her sister just stood there on the porch with her arms folded, eyes wary. You saw him, didn't you? Patrice barked. Her sister gave a slow nod. He was here yesterday. Calm. Focused. He explained everything. Patrice's mouth hung open. He what? He didn't yell. He didn't complain. He just showed me documents. Dates. Proof. Said he wanted me to know what was coming so I wouldn't be confused when you tried to twist it. Patrice staggered backward, like the wind had punched her. You're taking his side? Her sister's voice dropped to a chill. I'm taking the truth side. She didn't remember driving back. Just the sound of her own breathing. Too fast, too shallow, and the low hum of reality clawing its way through her denial. She turned onto our street like someone approaching a crime scene. And it was. 2 moving trucks flanked the house. Three men she'd never seen before were carrying out boxes with swift efficiency. She slammed the brakes, leapt out, and screamed, "What the hell is going on?" One of the movers calmly handed her a clipboard and said, "Ma'am, this property is being vacated per the order on file. Final load's almost done." She shoved past him into the house. Her house, damn it, and nearly slipped on the polished floor. The furniture was gone. Walls bare. Cabinets empty. The only thing left in the living room was a single cardboard box placed dead center, like it was waiting for her. Marker scrawled on top, "Your words." She stared at it for a long time, then slowly peeled the tape back. Inside, a stack of neatly printed screenshots. Messages. Group chats. Her emails. Every snide comment she'd made about me to friends. Calling me a boring relic, a slow-dying spreadsheet in human form. A walking beige sweater. There were dated printouts of her cruel jokes from holiday parties. A particularly long one she'd sent her sister. "Martin's basically wallpaper now. I don't even hear him when he talks." Under those, bank transactions. Tied to dinners and jewelry. Then, the final piece. A color printout of a message from her private Gmail. Sent to a man labeled D. The message was short. "He's not suspicious. He never is. Honestly, I wish he'd just disappear so we could start fresh. Soon." The timestamp? 3 days before Thanksgiving. She dropped the folder like it burned. The movers exited behind her, brushing past like ghosts, carrying out the last of the echoes. No goodbyes. No judgment. Just duty. She was alone now, in the shell of her own house. Correction, not her house. She stood there in the quiet, surrounded by air that no longer belonged to her, holding a box of evidence she never thought anyone would see. For the first time in her life, Patrice had run out of people to talk to. The only voice left was her own, and now it was staring back at her, in ink, in print, in cold, undeniable black and white. The call came at 4:42 p.m. Patrice had been staring at the blank wall where the television used to hang, box still open at her feet, its contents scattered like forensic evidence. The room felt heavier now, stripped of furniture and noise. Only her breath filled the space, and it wasn't steady. The phone vibrated once on the floor beside her. Meredith. She scrambled for it like a drowning woman reaching for driftwood. Meredith. Oh, thank God, finally. There was a pause on the other end. Cold. Flat. Not even a pretense of comfort. "I warned you," Meredith said, her voice low and measured. "Last year. I told you to stop." Patrice blinked. "Stop what?" I don't even. Stop mocking him. Stop treating him like furniture. Like a malfunctioning appliance you're too lazy to replace. I told you I wouldn't stand by and watch you whittle him down." Patrice's voice cracked. "He's trying to erase me." "No," Meredith said sharply. "He's finally remembering himself." The silence that followed was deep enough to swallow her whole. "Wait, Meredith, please. You don't understand. He's turning everyone against me. He came to your aunt's. He's planning this. He's... You think we didn't notice?" Meredith cut in, colder now. "You think no one noticed how you spoke to him at dinner? Or at Christmas? Or that night you accidentally locked him out during a snowstorm?" "That was," Patrice stammered. "That was a misunderstanding. He left his coat." "I was there," Meredith snapped. "You laughed. You told me. Maybe freezing will knock some sense into him." "I remember everything, Mom." Patrice went quiet. The old excuses withered before they even made it out. "I don't hate you," Meredith said after a long breath. "But I'm not rescuing you. You built this. One snide comment at a time." Then the click. The line went dead. Patrice sat there, holding the phone against her ear long after the screen went dark. Hoping, praying it was a mistake. That the call had dropped. That Meredith would call back and say she didn't mean it. But no call came. No text. Just the quiet weight of truth settling into her ribcage like wet cement. She tried to tell herself this was temporary. That blood was thicker than bruised pride. That daughters don't just turn cold overnight. But the worst part? She hadn't realized Meredith was slipping away for years. She'd missed the distancing. The short calls. The eye rolls when she belittled Martin at Thanksgiving. The forced smiles when she insulted his obsession with organization or teased him for spending weekends in the garage cataloging old photos. She'd mistaken silence for compliance. Now there was no hiding in it. Her daughter, their daughter, had chosen a side. And it wasn't hers. In that empty living room, with only a box full of shame and the echo of her own voice, Patrice felt it for the first time. Not confusion, not outrage, but something rawer. Abandonment. Not the kind she inflicted. the kind she couldn't outrun. At 9:06 the next morning, Patrice's inbox pinged. The subject line read, "Secure link, from the office of Langford, Sharp and Moore LLP." For a moment, she stared at it, blinking through a film of exhaustion. Her hand hovered over the mouse like it might burn her. Her brain, still scrambled from the silence of the night before, tried to tell her this was a mistake. A billing error. Maybe spam. But her name was spelled correctly, and the logo was real. She clicked. A loading bar filled the screen. Then a simple prompt. Press play to begin. Martin appeared on the screen. Crisp navy sweater, clean-shaven, sitting in a quiet office with soft amber light and a glass of water placed precisely beside him. "Patrice," he said. No anger. No emotion. Just a tired steadiness that unnerved her more than any rage could have. "I don't hate you, but I refuse to be your audience anymore." She flinched. It wasn't a threat. It was worse. It was a resignation. A release. "You made your position clear." Loudly. Repeatedly. "And for years, I tolerated it because I confused endurance with commitment." He looked directly into the camera. Her throat tightened. "But I've stopped tolerating. I've started reclaiming." The video cut to a new screen, a spreadsheet. Clean. Ruthlessly organized. Line by line. It detailed transfers. Funds moved into holding accounts. LLCs she'd never heard of. Trusts with names that sounded vaguely familiar, but now existed fully separate from her. Property reassigned. Deeds updated. Custodial designations revoked. Medical directives altered. Power of attorney stripped. In the bottom right corner. Initiated 14 months ago. Completion 93%. Projected finalization 6 days. Then a second tab opened automatically. Charitable donations. Dozens. Organizations with missions she'd mocked over dinner. Causes Martin had once quietly mentioned, then stopped bringing up after she rolled her eyes one too many times. One of the donations, a large sum redirected from a joint account she assumed was still for renovations. Recipient, a veteran's shelter named after Martin's father. Another, a scholarship fund, created in her mother's maiden name. A legacy without her. Her hand flew to her mouth as her eyes skimmed the bottom note. Assets formerly listed under Patrice E. Mallory. Current status, reallocated pending final legal clearance. Percentage recoverable, 0%. The screen faded back to Martin. His eyes were softer now. Not cruel. Not triumphant. Just done. "I'm not erasing you," he said. "I'm just choosing to stop being erased." A pause. "This video will self-expire in 24 hours. You may download the attached documents for your records. But there's nothing left to argue. You made your wishes clear. You wished I'd disappear." He leaned forward slightly. "So I did." The video ended. Patrice sat frozen, staring at the playback bar, as if replaying it would produce a different ending. But it didn't. She clicked through the documents. Legal filings, irrevocable decisions. Her own notarized signatures next to ones she didn't remember signing. The attorney had prepared everything with surgical precision. It wasn't revenge. It was an extraction. And she'd never even felt the scalpel. She tried calling the law firm. Voicemail. She tried reloading the link. Video marked as viewed. Session complete. The cursor blinked in the empty screen. She looked around the house. No longer a home. No furniture. No echoes. Just that same hollow ringing silence. Everything she thought was theirs had slipped from her grasp like dust through open fingers. And he hadn't yelled. He hadn't thrown a fit. He just left. Systematically. Intelligently. Silently. And now all that remained was the weight of her own voice saying, "I wish he'd just disappear." Wish granted. At exactly 1:17 p.m., her phone buzzed. Just once. A text. No contact name. Just a number she didn't recognize. "If you want closure, meet at 4 p.m., 127 Wexley Street." That was it. No punctuation. No plea. No tone. Just coordinates. She read it 5 times before Googling the address. Wexley Street. Townhouse community. Nothing fancy. 2 towns over. East side. She zoomed in on the street view. Identical beige units, like soldiers standing at attention, stripped of personality. Her hands shook as she grabbed her coat. Closure. The word echoed like a dare. Like a test. She hadn't eaten. She couldn't remember if she'd even slept. But she drove, straight through a red light at one point, and didn't even flinch. Just clenched the wheel like it owed her an apology. By the time she parked in front of 127 Wexley Street, her mouth was dry, her palms slick. It was unimpressive. Quiet. A single hanging plant by the door. A brass mailbox. A curtain slightly pulled to the side. She rang the bell once. The door opened almost immediately. Martin stood there. Not surprised. Not smug. Not welcoming either. Just present. He looked different. Not younger. Not happier. Just unburdened. Inside, the house was crisp. Minimalist. No clutter. No family photos. No memorabilia from a life they once shared. Just one chair. One small table. And one folder. He gestured toward the chair opposite him. She sat. Slowly. Like approaching a cliff. Her voice cracked before the words even formed. "We can fix this." Martin looked at her for a long time. Not cruelly. Not angrily. Just with the weary stillness of a man who's already signed the final page. He pushed the folder across the table. She opened it. One check. Exactly covering her last mortgage contribution. Down to the cent. Nothing more. She blinked at it. "What is this?" "Your half of the house," he said. "The last one." It was never about the money. She swallowed hard. "You planned all this. You were waiting for me to mess up." "I wasn't waiting," he said. "I was watching. And documenting. And deciding whether silence was strength or stupidity." He leaned forward, folded his hands. "This place is where I'll be. Quiet. Out of your way. No more interruptions. You asked me to disappear." He nodded once. "So I did." She stared at him, blinking rapidly, willing tears to come, but they didn't. "You don't mean this," she said. "I do," he said simply. "You don't get to rewrite history just because I made a few mistakes." He tilted his head. "Mistakes repeat. Patterns endure. Histories don't rewrite themselves. People do." She closed the folder, slowly, as if that might change the outcome. "You're really just walking away?" "I already did," he said. "This is just the echo." Silence stretched between them, heavy with years of words that now meant nothing. "I don't hate you," he added. "But I'm done performing for someone who boos from the front row." She opened her mouth. No sound came out. He stood, walked to the door, and held it open. The gesture wasn't chivalrous. It was final. She stood, folder clutched like a crutch, and walked past him. The last thing she saw before the door shut behind her was the room where a man had rebuilt himself brick by brick, after she'd spent years kicking at the foundation. There were no dramatic goodbyes. No last-minute breakdown. Just the sound of a lock turning. In a house that would never belong to her, not even in memory. That night, Patrice stood on the doorstep of what used to be her home, gripping the cold brass handle like it might still recognize her. But the lock didn't budge. She rattled it once, then harder. Nothing. Through the window, she saw only emptiness. Bare walls. Clean floors. The ghost of a life that had been removed like a stain scrubbed out with bleach. She turned, hoping, expecting, to see someone she could confront, demand answers from, force a reckoning. But the street was quiet. Until the car rolled by. A sleek black sedan, windows tinted, engine humming low. In the back seat, Martin sat, not looking at her, just forward. Still, poised. She stepped off the porch, into the street, waving both hands. "Martin." Nothing. The car slowed, but didn't stop. His eyes met hers for a single, frozen second. Then the car pulled away, tires whispering over asphalt like a secret being kept. She stood in the middle of the road, robe fluttering in the wind, and finally understood what it meant to be on the outside of your own story. The next morning, the realtor arrived with a clipboard and 2 assistants. Patrice tried to explain, to assert, to protest. But the paperwork had no space for her name. Ownership had already changed hands. The new listing photo would be taken that afternoon. She wasn't a resident. She was clutter. She pushed open the side door, the one that had always stuck, and stepped into the kitchen one last time. It was spotless. Too clean. Like no one had ever argued here. Like no one had stood in this spot and said, "I wish he'd just disappear." On the counter, one last note. No envelope. Just a folded card with her name on the front. Inside, scrawled in that familiar, sharp handwriting. "You said you wished I'd disappear. You should have been more careful what you wished for." The paper trembled in her hand, but not from the wind. And just like that, the house she once ruled over with smirks and silence had become his final word. A vanishing act so complete it didn't even leave room for applause. Sometimes, the cruelest revenge isn't loud or vengeful. It's silence paired with total control. Martin didn't explode or punish. He simply stopped participating. And honestly, that might be the most powerful way to reclaim your dignity when someone's been erasing it piece by piece.